think that our issues in our different countries, so much of them stem from ignorance and the lack of understanding in the public about these ideas. And unless we solve for that, unless we remedy that, it's just going to be more of the same that we experience.
Welcome to the Break Free Podcast. I am your host, David Mancilla. As always, guys, we bring brilliant minds, incredible entrepreneurs to this show for two reasons: to inspire people to get going on their own enterprise, or to get entrepreneurs to the next level in their path. As everybody knows, small and medium-sized businesses run the economy of the free world. And I have taken upon me to help fuel that economy by getting advice from people that have made it in life and business so that we can all grow together as a free country, or as free countries. So today I have with me Connor. Brother, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I know that this is been a while since I wanted to interview you and finally was able to do so. For the sake of the audience, can you tell me your full name and where do you live and what do you do for a living?
Absolutely. Well, thanks, David. I'm glad to be with you. It's good to see you in Phoenix recently, where we were both a little bit warmer than I am now. I'm very chilly here in Utah. Grew up in California, but I now live in Utah with my family. And I do a few things. They all revolve around what you said, David, about free countries, trying to have more freedom and a free society. And so I run a nonprofit that I founded called Libertas Institute, and it exists to change laws, get regulations out of the way so entrepreneurs can go build their businesses and families can have more autonomy and self-determination. So we change a lot of laws in Utah and across the country. And then I also write a lot of books. The most popular ones are the Tuttle Twins children's books. These help kids of all ages learn about entrepreneurship and money and freedom and personal responsibility and education and choice and all kinds of powerful ideas that certainly we as adults need to learn. Many of us didn't learn in public schools when we were younger. And so it's interesting how many parents learn from our books as well, even though we created them for their children. But the Tuttle Twins books have sold millions of copies. We translate them into like 12 languages. We have a cartoon out now. And so we're really just trying to grow a content empire to provide for families all kinds of materials and support so that they can talk to their kids about what's going on in the world. You know, what's inflation? Why is it happening? You know, and now kids can understand a lot of these ideas using the Tuttle Twins. And so both fighting for, freedom with legal changes and then educating with a lot of these books. That's kind of me in a nutshell.
You see how amazing you fit in this podcast, brother? It's incredible. Thank you so much for your work. This is amazing. I cannot wait to get started on this conversation. Before we start, I'd like you to explain your whiteboard in the back and also your frame on your right-hand side.
All right. So for those who are watching the video version, or maybe not, I'll explain. Behind me is a whiteboard with all my chaotic thoughts. This is my brainstorming board. And so I typically will stand in front of it and just jot things down. And then when ideas stick, when there's things I want to capture and remember, I'll move them over onto my computer in what I call my second brain, which for me is I use Notion, which is a kind of a note-taking and content creating app. And so this is a great way for me to just visually brainstorm the different colors, the ability to just write it out. I have a Remarkable as well that I use similarly for that purpose. So that's the board behind me. And then this right here on my wall, I actually have some artwork right here in the corner. And so the one that you were looking at is an illustration from one of our children's books where we talk about what's called Leviathan, which is just a term that references the government. It's big government, basically. And so what this illustration from this particular book is pointing out that as all of these different crises happen, all these horrible things that happen, the government grew because we get scared and we say, save us from this crazy thing happening. And the government passes new laws, raises taxes, spends more money, hires more people, but it never shrinks back down. And so Leviathan, big government, just grows and grows and grows every time we have, the war on drugs, 9/11, the banking crisis, the healthcare crisis, COVID, economic crisis. And so that's what that one is. I've got here a bunch of different currencies that have hyperinflated. So we got Zimbabwe, Germany, Venezuela, because a lot of what we talk about is economics and what policies lead towards hyperinflation and why we need to stop them. And then finally, right here, I have a custom drawn version of from one of our books, The Creature from Jekyll Island, which is the Federal Reserve. And so this is Ethan and Emily, our main characters, and they're trapped in the tentacles of this big creature. And in the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, we talk about how, let's see if I have the book here. Nope, I guess I don't have the book. The Creature from Jekyll Island, it's a book all about how the Federal Reserve is this kind of creature that goes around changing prices. And we see it today with inflation. And a lot of people, like President Biden, is like, oh, it's because of Ukraine that we're having inflation. Like, no, that's not why there's inflation. It's because the Federal Reserve is pumping a ton of new money into the economy. So we help kids understand that with this idea of a creature in this story. And so that's what that custom artwork is from our book. So just a few little fun things in my office.
Fascinating. Just give me an idea. For my granddaughters, I'm just going to give them your books for Christmas.
Great. I love it.
Awesome. So
I
if
approve.
people want to buy your books to inspire children to start learning about economy and how to preserve our free economy, how do they go about to do that?
So the best place is TuttleTwins.com, TUTTLE. TuttleTwins.com. When you go there, we've got a big discount going, and then also we give free activity workbooks. And so you can find them on Amazon too, but you actually get a better deal on our website with those freebies and the discounts as well. So TuttleTwins.com is where you can check them out.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Tell me, let's go back in time, because you look like you are 29 and you have done so much already.
41, but thank you.
How did you start all this? What did you start first, the non-for-profit or your publishing company, your book publishing company?
Well, the nonprofit started first, but it came after years of me having an entrepreneurial desire, but never really succeeding. I freelanced for a little bit. I used to be a web developer, so I would build websites for people. So I would freelance. I started my own little consulting business. I started a few different business ventures that never really went anywhere. I always struggled because, I would work with a partner, a business guy, but I had to do all the work, right? I had to go build the prototype and then if it didn't take off, they had hardly spent any time working on it. And I had spent a ton of time building a prototype. And so I got kind of burned out a few times, but I wanted the autonomy. I liked the independence, the freedom that entrepreneurship provided, but I couldn't really figure out how to get there until finally I discovered that even though I had this technical background with web development, graphic design, marketing, I actually far more enjoyed getting involved in kind of the political process, because I saw a lot of garbage happening that was hurting entrepreneurs, that was hurting families, and no one was really standing up to fight it. And so I started kind of volunteering with some organizations, getting involved, and I realized that I had a knack for it, that I was actually pretty good at being persuasive and meeting with elected officials and building websites and billboards to put up on the freeway and ad campaigns. So I could take a lot of the skills that I had built before, but now I could apply them in a different context where I had way more personal, passion for making a significant difference in my community rather than just building, a random website for some company. And so my heart quickly, was directed towards this type of work because it was so meaningful. And the people who I was helping after changing these laws, were very grateful, of course. And so I really loved to be of service. I loved to apply my talents. I just had to figure out how to monetize it, how to make this into a sustainable thing. So with a nonprofit, as with most nonprofits, you raise donations from people who want to support what you're doing. But being more entrepreneurial, I never wanted to rely entirely on donations. I don't like that model. You may recall, David, the conference we were just at together, that there was someone there on stage talking about how they run a nonprofit, but there's also a for-profit element to it, and they kind of have a mixture of two. In their case, it was for heart research and kind of scientific development of different medical devices and technologies. But in my case, it is, we produce a lot of books. We sell a ton of books. We create a lot of revenue. We host kids markets where kids can actually practice entrepreneurship and buy and sell things, and we charge fees for that. And so developing revenue streams for our organization outside of just soliciting donations has been important for me, because even though our organization is not itself a for-profit, I try and operate it, and it's just a tax status at the end of the day. And so I try and operate it just as I would in a for-profit context, to be as responsive to the market as possible, rather than doing what my donors want, or what some rich guy just says, hey, go do this. I want to be creating products and services that benefit the people at large, rather than pleasing one person who happened to write me a big check. And so I've actually really enjoyed operating at that intersection of nonprofits and entrepreneurship, to leverage both revenue from the market as that feedback mechanism, but also philanthropy, and be able to inject a lot of capital quickly into building what we're doing. So that's kind of what led me to today, is like this desire to help people and change laws and apply those skills, but then also develop some products like the Tuttle Twins books, where we can kind of have a business in a sense, and still be able to put out a lot of good into the world.
Amazing, because you're actually doing two things that are very complicated and not easy. I'm a board member of a non-for-profit here in town that supports multiculturalism and music from around the world into Canada. And we've been running that for 17 years, and this every year gets harder. It's not easy to run a non-for-profit. I'd much rather run a business,
You're not wrong. It does have its complications, but it can also be gratifying work, because a lot of people are doing some really amazing things that I think sometimes might be difficult to monetize as a for-profit. For example, us, changing laws to get help entrepreneurs have less regulations for their businesses. It's really hard to, I guess you could be like a for-profit lobbying, company that goes and helps them, and those exist. But yeah, to me, it's a good intersection, and we feel really good about where we're at.
Beautiful. As I started my entrepreneurial career, I was just a software architect that wanted to run his own business, and I knew nothing really about economy or anything else. And as I grew older as an entrepreneur, and taxation started impacting my business, some years in a positive way and some other years in a very negative way, I was like, oh my God, I gotta learn more about this. And my CFO is so involved into world politics pertaining to taxation and the economy that he started instructing me on some things. For example, the Federal Reserve System, how the Bank of Canada and the Federal Reserve are private institutions that run our money supply. Is like, and you think they are part of the government, but there is not. And people, totally. I bet 80% of the population don't know that, right?
Oh no, you're exactly right. I always, when I'm speaking in public, I'll pull out, in this case, I have a $5 bill. And so for, Americans, I'm sure yours says something different. At the top, it used to say, United States dollar. Now this says Federal Reserve Note. This is actually a privately held note that is owned and controlled by a private bank. And you're right, they determine the fate of our money, the rate of our interest, how cheap it is to basically make new money. And I completely agree with you. Most people are completely clueless about this type of stuff. But maybe let me ask you, David, a question. When your CFO taught you all of that, did you find the information empowering? Like, was it just a curiosity thing, or did that knowledge empower you in any way for your business?
So it was a transformative process in my brain. First, I got angry, then I got depressed, and then I thought, okay, I live within a system, and it's very hard to change the rules. How do I actually work within those rules to help my business grow? So I took a positive approach at the end, but it took me 5 years, honestly. I learned, first, I fired my financial advisor. Then I took over my own finances. Then I realized that we run on debt. So you see, I was born in a country that debt is not really used for the population. So I come from Guatemala, third world country. And back then, like I mean, people have credit cards and it's more popular now, but it's really still not like if you want to buy a house, you better have 50% of the house or the interest rate will let you alive. So it's a cash economy, it's not a debt economy.
Yeah.
You come to North America, it's backwards, right? Like if you don't have a credit card, by the time you're ready to get your mortgage, you will never get a mortgage.
Right.
And then at college, they hand you these credit cards for free, and you start spending all this money thinking it's your money without realizing you're going to pay 30% in interest.
Yeah.
So just learning about simple interest versus compound interest, for example. We run a real estate business on the side with my wife, and we have mortgages there. And we just realized that if we use a simple interest rate through a line of credit to pay those mortgages off instead of a compound interest rate, I can be paying 15, 20% interest rate a year on a single interest line of credit than paying 4 or 5% on a mortgage. I'm going to save 75% in money by doing that.
Wow.
Nobody knows that, right? But when you start realizing how everything works and how you can still use the rules to your advantage, and then the rules that don't make sense, go and raise your voice like you're doing. That's much more difficult to do. So I admire you for that, by the way.
Thank you. It is very difficult, and some things are easier than others. I don't think we're going to abolish the Federal Reserve tomorrow, unfortunately. Try though I might. But no, we do try and focus on things that can actually make a difference, and trying to make sure that there is some level of impact there. I don't want to spend my days, shouting into the wind and not accomplishing anything. But what's interesting is as I've gotten involved in this work, what I've learned is so many parents, adults want to make a difference. They want to be involved. They want to help their businesses. They want to maybe start a business, but they often feel like they are ill prepared to do so because they lack the knowledge. I can't tell you how many parents, one of the biggest impediments before people buy our Tuttle Twins books is that the parents have a desire to talk to their kids about these ideas, freedom, entrepreneurship, and so forth, but they feel inadequate in doing so. They feel like they don't understand economics, or they don't understand how markets work, or why inflation is happening, or, they don't understand it. And so they don't talk to their kids about it. And so that's what the Tuttle Twins tries to solve for, is say, well, just read this book together. Then you can have a conversation about it. It will help you. But so many parents are realizing that they have a desire, an expressed desire that they can't fully realize because their own education has been so limited. So to me, that is a failure of our government schools. It's a failure of the curriculum to actually help kids learn how to start a business, or how the Federal Reserve works, or what compound interest is, and all these things, right? So often the schools are just not teaching this stuff. And if they are, they're not teaching it in a way that sticks. They're instead teaching it because it'll be on the test. So the kids memorize. They do what I call pump and dump. They'll, pump their head full of stuff and then they'll dump it out because it doesn't have context. They're not taught in a way that helps them understand, how does this help me today? How is this relevant to my life? And so I struggled in school, and so many entrepreneurs do, right? Because we're not wired for a way to just sit at a desk and do what you're told. And so I am very passionate about trying to help more families realize that they may find more success in pursuing education alternatives with their kids, pulling them out, homeschooling, whatever, because my mom apologizes to this day that she did not homeschool me. It wasn't really a thing in California back in the 80s and 90s. And but in retrospect, she wishes that she would have known about it and done it because of how much I struggled in school and how I kind of had to play catch up after I graduated and really self-educate. And so I've become very passionate about that. And I think that our issues in our different countries, so much of them stem from ignorance and the lack of understanding in the public about these ideas. And unless we solve for that, unless we remedy that, it's just going to be more of the same that we experience.
That's beautiful. How did you get the idea to publish your first book? And how do you actually became popular? Selling books is not easy either, right? Like I wrote a book called Breaking Out of Corporate Jail back in 2020, and it became #1 on Amazon, but still we didn't sell that many copies. It was just because we were the best sellers in 3 categories, that's all. But that doesn't mean I sold, millions of copies like you did, right?
It's been a big trial and error. It took me about 3 or 4 years to finally figure it out. The first book was really just a response to a perceived need. I wanted to talk to my kids about these ideas that I was fighting for in my daily job with my nonprofit. And my kids were young. And so I went on Amazon looking for books that would, because there's books on potty training and the birds and the bees and everything. And I thought, surely there will be books to talk about, property rights or justice or free markets. There was nothing. And so it was that idea and some conversation with my partner, Elijah, who's our illustrator, that prompted us to say, let's go, try a book. Let's write a book that we would want for our kids. A lot of other people bought it too, so that was good validation, but we wrote it for our kids to really teach them. And in terms of being able to sell the millions of copies that we have and grow this, what I finally ultimately realized is that it's very hard to sell a book for $10, $15, $20, especially on Amazon, because they take a 55% cut. And then if you have a publisher, they're taking a cut and you're getting like $1 a book. There's not really a sustainable model unless you can get on Oprah or you have a big name behind yourself. I didn't have any of that. So after, because I had a background in marketing, so it took me a little bit to develop this. But what I realized is that I needed to get the price point to a level where I could run paid ads and have the cost of acquisition be below my revenue margin. And so once I had written a few books, I now had a bundle. I had a series of books. When it was one book, it's just one book. There's something magic and psychological in people's mind about a book series that transforms it into something else. Have you read the Harry Potter series or the Wingfeather Saga series or the Tuttle Twins series? People respond, or even business books too. People respond to a series differently than they do to a single book. And then beyond that, I had this realization that if I could increase the perceived value, then I could charge a higher price. And so instead of just selling books, I started creating activity workbooks. So these were like PDFs that were downloadable, but they had little activities, crossword puzzles and word searches and things like that, you read the book and then you can go do the activity workbook. Well, suddenly at the time, I think I had 5 books in the bundle, and then I had 5 activity workbooks on top of that. So I could say, hey, this bundle is worth, $80. Get it today for, $45 or whatever. And if my cost of acquisition was, at the right price point, I could just turn that into an engine that runs all day long because, I was basically advertising for free. And especially as a nonprofit where all I need to do is break even, like we have a lot of costs and everything too, but I don't have to try and, pad the pockets of the owner or anything like that. I can just run this as a revenue neutral operation. And as long as that cost of acquisition was below the revenue margin, I could just keep doing that all day long. The challenging thing over time is that advertising costs have grown, substantially. So cost of acquisition has increased, but that really just makes us continue to figure out how can we add even more value into this offer so that we can charge a higher price, overwhelm them with value. And that's the engine that for 2.5, 3 years now, we've been running where I didn't even list on Amazon at the beginning because I wanted to know who all my customers were. If you sell on Amazon, you have no clue who's buying your book. So then when you go write another book, you just spray and pray. You just put it out on the internet and hope that people will find it. Yeah. And hope that Amazon will email those past customers and say, hey, David wrote another book or, whatever. And so we did not list on Amazon. We wanted everyone who wanted the book and heard about the book to come to our website. That way we could capture their customer information and communicate with them in the future about when we put out new books. And so we've since listed on Amazon, but they're like 1% of our sales because we've monetized this to a degree where we can run ads to our website, make enough money to pay for the acquisition cost, capture their customer information so that we can market to them in the future and increase the lifetime value, which means that our cost of acquisition can increase as well because we're selling repeat products and things like that. So ultimately, it's been beneficial. It's been a hard and long road to get here, but that is the reason why we've sold so many books is that we've kind of built a sustainable marketing model that you can't really do with like a traditional publishing model. It just doesn't really, unfortunately, work.
It's incredible. Like You're such a genius, and like I'm not praising you. This is the truth. How can you come from a web development background to a master digital marketer? Because what I'm realizing is that without your digital marketing skills, you will be in a standstill, right?
Yeah.
How did you do that transition? How do you realize, okay, if I need to do this non-for-profit and fund it, I need to become a digital marketer?
Well, I was still a web developer full time as I was launching my nonprofit. I was doing it like nights and weekends, just trying to get it off the ground. But I realized, because the work there was increasing so much, I realized that I needed to find a way to flip it so that I could focus full time on the nonprofit and maybe still have a few web development, projects and contracts just to help supplement my income. And so I made that switch. I found enough donors who were willing to help me say, like, okay, let's just have you go full time. I took a big pay cut, and I jumped over and I flipped the switch. But yeah, I had that marketing background. But what I realized is that it was very insufficient. I had to learn a lot more, especially if we wanted to grow and not just plateau. And so I read a lot. I watched a ton of videos. One of the people that was very helpful early on for me was Russell Brunson, who runs ClickFunnels out of Idaho, very popular marketing company. He's written a number of books, one of which is called .com Secrets. That was very helpful for me to start to figure out funnels, right? So you get someone to come in on a page and then you got to upsell them and then have a downsell. And how do you even structure that process so that maybe when, like, one of the offers we sometimes do periodically is a free book. So it's a free plus shipping offer. So you come to our website when we're running one of these offers and it says, hey, get a free book that talks to your kids about the creature from Jekyll Island, the Federal Reserve, and inflation. Do you think your kids should know about inflation? Here's a free book, just pay shipping. And so the shipping is, $5 or $6. In reality, it's paying for the book and the shipment itself. And so we're kind of breaking even. But we had to pay maybe $10 or $20 to acquire that customer. And so after they get the free book, we then say, hey, great, would you like to add the ebook? Would you like to add the workbook? Would you like to upgrade? So then maybe 15% of people upgrade there, and then they go to the next page and it's like, oh, by the way, this is one book of 13 in the series. It's normally $120 for the whole bundle. Get it today for half off, $60. And then maybe 10% of people upgrade to that. But when you add everything together and those percentages of people who upgraded, if you're doing this right, you've earned enough money here from your upsell offers to pay for all of the acquisition. And so I learned that first from Russell Brunson, and I've since read many other people. But I never learned, like, I look back and I'm just like, could I never have been in a school class that talked about this? Why could I have never been taught by entrepreneurs, when I was younger? I had to listen to random podcasts, watch random YouTube videos. And the sad thing for me was I had to, out of all the content that I consumed to learn marketing more deeply, I would say 15% of it was relevant and applicable. A lot of it was just they'd repeat themselves, or it would be outdated, or it's like, the bag of potato chips that's 1/5 full of chips. It's just full of air. Right. Most business books are mostly just words you don't even need. It's like, this could be a 10-page ebook to really, convey your point. So it was a long process. And, but for me, what was driving it is, and I have no problem with people who want to make money and capitalists and everything. I'm fully on board with that. But mine, I saw and see as this higher purpose venture of to me, making money is it's fuel for a rocket ship. Mm-hmm. And I need to make more money. I need to generate more revenue so that rocket ship can go further, because I'm trying to, reach a big destination. I'm trying to serve a bunch of people. I'm trying to teach a bunch of kids. So for me, as I think about my entrepreneurship, it's all about how can I scale what I'm doing to serve more families. And that means, raising a lot of money. It means monetizing my products better. It means scaling my ads. But ultimately, it's that kind of higher purpose thing that I'm trying to do to just add a lot of good to our society.
This is one of the differentiators between a broken entrepreneur and so entrepreneur and a successful entrepreneur. I've had over 100 episodes in this podcast, and I am a computer scientist, so I can see patterns. And what you just said is one of the patterns. If people are inspired by a higher purpose in their business, they tend to do awesome things because it gives you the grit to go through adversity, isn't it? If your heart is not in it, the first big obstacle that you face, you're going to quit, right?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a good point, because the pursuit of money can only last so long, right? If it's not, I know many people for whom that is their priority. And as I reflect now on what you just said, David, like I can see the wisdom in that, because some of these people, when they're so focused on the money, their frustration levels when they have challenges in their business are significant. They react, very strongly. Like big mood swings, up and down, and that is. I'll have to reflect more on that. That is kind of interesting. And so maybe the invitation is for us to figure out what is that purpose and what we're trying to do beyond just growing our business and making money. It's like, are we trying to create value for other people? Of course, David, because we were at the same conference, our friend Joe Polish just put out a new book, What's in It for Them? And it's all about how are you creating value for other people? What does he call it? Being a pain detective, trying to help other people who are in pain. And I really love that perspective, because I see business the same way. I see entrepreneurship the same way. I just call entrepreneurship problem solving. You identify a problem, you come up with a solution, and then many people want that solution to solve their problem, and you have an exchange and you make money. But I think ultimately it's problem solving. And so what I love about entrepreneurship and that higher purpose we were just talking about is our higher purpose really should just be helping people, helping their pain, helping them solve their problems. And that to me is the beauty of entrepreneurship, that it is creating a better world, because we're not just trying to extract wealth from people and take things from people. We're trying to grow wealth by contributing a lot to the world that positively impacts people's lives. So to me, entrepreneurship is a massively positive thing for that reason.
It's beautiful. I was just talking with an investment banker the other day, and he grew in poverty. He grew in a pig farm. He called it first class poverty. So basically, there was food at the table, but there was barely enough money for clothes, right? To that type of extreme poverty. And then he went into economics, and that was his biggest frustration. And now he's a multi-million-dollar entrepreneur with multiple businesses. And now he actually helps people with selling their business. That's what he does, right?
That's great.
And that's a classic example of what we're talking about. This is what motivates me. That's why I have this podcast. When I listen to stories like that, now put this guy in a country where there's no freedom, right? In a country where maybe there's a dictatorship or communism or whatever you want to call it. That person would have been maybe poor for the rest of their life.
Yep.
So we still have this, in this society, we still have this chance that if you really want to make something out of yourself, if you apply yourself, you can still do it, right? And the beautiful part is that the only way you can become a successful person without being a criminal is by helping other people, by solving those pains, right? In my case, I was all about the money at the beginning. I opened my business because I wanted to have more free time and freedom of travel. But at the beginning, it was so hard that all I focused was on breaking even and trying to, make ends meet. And that became into a little monster that grew into a big monster where everything was about the revenue, until I finally had a heart attack, because my brain and my heart was not in coherence. My heart wanted to bless people, and my brain wanted money, right? So this conflict was so good that my heart said, "This is enough. I'll stop working now."
Wow.
And then I had to relearn, right? I took a leadership course. I rebooted my business from scratch in 2013. And then I became exponentially wealthy and exponentially blessed and happy. But the one thing that changed is before I went to a project to see how much money I could make. Now I go into a project to see how much I can bless the person that is giving me the opportunity to have their business. How can my unique ability and my unique process can actually solve the problem in a better way? And then the money always comes. But money is not the main factor anymore. Of course, we have to pay for the lights and salaries and everything else. Another thing is talking to my employees, right? what's in it for my employees? What is in it for them too? Like, do they have a place where they can grow their career? Or at least do they have a place where they can get trained so they can jump into another business later on to grow their career? Which happens a lot, by the way. And, it makes me so happy. I'll tell you a story. A very wealthy real estate investor in the States, through a friend of mine, contacted me because he has this non-for-profit in Africa where he brings orphans and they take them all the way up to university.
Wow.
And he has helped about 500 kids so far. And one of these kids became a master and she moved to Canada and she had no job here. I didn't have a job offer for her, but I said, hey, let's put her as a receptionist. And so she worked with us for a couple of years. Now she's a project manager at the TD Bank, one of the biggest banks in the country. And I'm like, this is what it's all about. What's in it for them? And by the way, she was one of the best office administrators we ever had.
That's awesome.
Right?
That's awesome. And what I love about that, David, is you don't know where those connections are going to happen. What I love about this whole idea of just helping people, creating value for others, is, and I've struggled with this. When I was growing up, I was more of a taker than a giver. I think a lot of teenagers and young people are, so I don't know that I was unique in that respect, but it was always, if we'd be at a buffet, I would load my plate with as much as possible. If we were trick-or-treating and there was a bowl out with candy and no one around, I would take more than one piece. I had this scarcity mentality of trying to take while I could take. And so in the past decade, I've had to really work on that to realize that, a giver mentality is something that can be learned. It is something that can be practiced. And so I've had to kind of let go of some of that scarcity mentality and understand the power of abundance, the power of having an additive multiplier effect, that if I invest in someone else, it's not a cost, it's an investment. And I may not see that investment for 5 years until I do, and then I'm blown away. Right. But had I not done that 5 years ago or paid the money or whatever, we would not have seen, that result. But it's almost like letting go of the expectations, letting go of the what's in it for me, letting go of the transactional nature of relationships, about like myopically thinking, what immediate impact is my business, going to see for this, letting go of all of I think of it like Matrix. The Matrix, where Morpheus is teaching Neo how to jump from one building to another. And he's like, you have to free your mind, and he struggles with that, of course. But I think that's what a lot of this comes down to, is I had to free my mind of this scarcity mentality and realize that I can feel better about myself, and I can better serve other people around me by having an abundance mentality and just trying to create value for them with my unique ability, with my skill set. And oh, by the way, as you just said, David, the money always comes. By the way, you'll be fine. You'll be taken care of. Mm-hmm. And maybe some years will be better than others. Maybe you'll grow, at different speeds at different times. But if you just focus on putting a lot of good out there, I'm not like a hippie. I don't really believe in karma and the law of reciprocity as like some universal rule. I don't knock those who do. I just don't believe, that type of thing directly myself. But I cannot deny its existence, right? It does happen, not in a one-to-one formula, not like every time you do something good will happen to you, but in an aggregate sense. I've lived long enough now. I am 41, not 27 or 29 or whatever you said. I wish. I've lived at least long enough where I have seen in the aggregate all these instances where, when I do focus on value creation and serving other people and think less of myself, I'm taken care of just fine. And then I feel better about myself because I wasn't so focused selfishly on myself. I'm taken care of as I take care of other people. It's really fun to experience.
It's crazy that you talk about that because, now we're in the era where there is this new age movement and all these Eastern philosophies and stuff like that. And I'm like, I went back to the Bible and I printed a slogan talking about this. I brought ancient wisdom from scripture. For example, one of them says, what you give, you receive, which is what we're talking about. It's not one-on-one, but in the great scale of life. That's it. And it's neutral, right? What you give, you receive.
Yeah.
If you give scarcity, you will get scarcity. If you give abundantly, you will receive abundantly. It's crazy, but it's there and it actually works. And until you open your mind, you realize this is why I had the heart attack, right? I was just so scared, right? I was so scared of not having enough. I was so scared of losing my business that I actually almost lost it.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. Well, it's from the Bible itself, right? Where you put your heart, where your treasure is, there is your heart also. And so if our treasure is money, then our heart is like, we're committed to the wrong thing. If our treasure is creating value and helping people and, doing good to other people, then our heart will be connected to that. And for whatever reason, like, we're taken care of along the way. I would love to see if there is some sort of like law of gravity level, like, law at play in how society operates that way. I don't know how it works. I don't know how gravity works either. It just does. And so maybe this is a reliable enough law that we, will be profited by not trying to operate against it, but with it instead.
That's fabulous, brother. I could be talking to you all afternoon. This is amazing. And I'm for sure will invite you again to keep tackling things because I want to go deeper into politics. I want to get deeper into economics and how this affects our world, our free world that we want to keep free. But I want to respect your time. I'm going to ask you one last question before we end this podcast. If you had access to a billboard in the busiest highway on earth, what would you write in it?
Ooh, I like that question. In part because I used to put up billboards for fun for various political projects. We would just raise some money and go put up a billboard with various political type statements and things like that. But to answer your question, this is something more substantive and significant. I would say, okay, here's my answer, just because so much of me is focused on freedom. There's this quote that I have found to be so impactful. It was by a French economist who lived in the 1850s named Frédéric Bastiat. He wrote an essay called La Loi, which means the law. And he has this quote. He says that government is the great fiction through which everyone endeavors to live at the expense of everyone else. In other words, we've turned government into this thing that destroys society. Society is entrepreneurship. It's creating exchange of value. It's buying and selling and voluntarily agreeing, forming associations together like the nonprofit that you're on a board of, coming together as society. Too often through government, it's quite the opposite. It's the taking principle. What can I get? I want a park down the road for my kids to play soccer. I want to control if my neighbors, paint their fence pink or not, or if they can have chickens in their backyard. We often use the government in a way that destroys society in the true sense. And we create animosity between neighbors. We create envy. And so as I look at the big meta picture of what's going on in our society, it's that government has turned in, as Bastiat said, into a fiction in which everyone is endeavoring to live at the expense of everyone else. The challenge with putting that on a billboard is people would drive by and I'm sure it would not sink into the level that I would want it to. So I may need to put a website at the bottom where go here to learn more, where I can expound for a few minutes on why this is important.
But it's so what you just said is so important. I think governments are necessary, but they have to be as small as possible, as lean as possible, and we just have to, have the rule of law and have the rules of the game respected. That's what we need. Yep. And then have free entrepreneurship and control monopolies, because I also don't believe in monopolies, right? Monopolies is the fastest way to create dictatorships, right? And we can have another whole podcast just to talk about that.
I'm sure we could, especially if we talk about Latin America and a lot of the issues down in Southern America and elsewhere. Whew. And we've talked before, David, about Guatemala. I'm heading there in a few weeks to Antigua, so I'm excited to get back. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Brother, thank you so much. If people want to learn more about your products and services or your non-for-profit, where can they find you?
So all of the children's books, if you have kids or grandkids, nieces and nephews, these make for excellent Christmas gifts. Those can all be found at TuttleTwins.com, Tuttle, TuttleTwins.com. If you're curious about our nonprofit and the legal work that we're doing, that is at Libertas.org, Libertas, Libertas.org.
Connor, brother, thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful next rest of the week, and God bless you with your endeavors. Keep going, brother.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free Podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.